Hi, I'm Tony. Welcome to Sports Bike Shop's review of the Scorpion ADX 2 helmet. This Scorpion ADX 2 is a relatively unusual beast. It's an adventure flip front helmet. It's got a peak for that adventure style and flip front capability for touring and commuting practicality. It's also easy to convert it to a peakless street helmet, so it's good for riders who want something versatile. I've worn one of these on the road for a few hundred miles, so I can run through the essential details and also give you some insight into what it's like. The ADX 2's shell is made from thermoplastic, as is the case with most sub £200 helmets like this. The main downside of a plastic shell, rather than one that's made from fibre composite, is extra weight. This one weighs in at the top of our charts. This size medium showed 1956 grams on our scales. That's the heaviest of the 123 size medium helmets we've weighed since we started producing these reviews. I didn't have any big issues with that weight while riding, but I could tell that I had a heavy helmet on my head. Owners are generally more positive about this, with only a few mentioning in their reviews that the helmet feels heavy, and at least one owner described their ADX2 as light, so it shows how even something like weight can be subjective as well. The opening mechanism is very simple. You push in the red button at the tip of the chin bar and then it's free to lift. The peak travels back until there's enough room for the chin bar to carry on to its final resting point on top of the helmet. There's a lock switch on the side that will stop the chin bar coming back down. Without this switch, there's still a reasonable amount of force required to make the chin bar fall down, but the safest option is always to lock it up. This is part of the dual homologation process. A dual homologated helmet like this has been safety tested as a full face helmet with the chin bar down and as an open face with it raised. Now, one thing I found with this switch, it will still function when the chin bar's down. If you lock it when the chin bar's down, when you next try and raise the chin bar, it won't open fully. So if that happens to you, it's worth checking this switch is back so that you can then fully lift the chin bar again. As it's dual homologated, it's legal to ride with the chin bar up. When you do that, the base of the chin bar and some of the peak are sat in the wind flow, which disrupts airflow over the helmet. That's why I'd say it's best to keep the open face configuration for low speed riding. When you close the chin bar, there's quite a pronounced click when it secures in place, so it's easy to know that it's been shut properly. Okay, the peak, that's something that's occasionally described by owners as wobbly. I wore this helmet on a very windy day and I experienced some wobbling from the peak, and I also found the mounting screw on the left side of the helmet had come loose. I couldn't say for sure whether the wobbling made the screw come loose or the screw coming loose made the wobble happen. I can say that tightening the screw made the wobble all but disappear. But tightening it by hand alone wasn't enough. For those of you who are old enough to remember what a coin is, using one of those tightened it enough to stop it coming undone again. So if I was buying an ADX2, I would make it my first job to tighten up those screws with a coin to make sure they're secure. If you want to run this helmet in motocross style, that's peak and no visor, you can do that. There is room in the eye port for goggles, but you'll need them to have relatively narrow frames or they may not fit inside. I got some Thor goggles in here, but it wasn't ideal. There wasn't quite enough room for them to seal against my face properly. If you want to ride with the visor but not the peak, that's much easier because there's provision for street mode. You've got covers supplied in the box that hold the visor in place here when the peak's removed. I'd say that's a good way to ride if you've got a long journey ahead of you, as you'll reduce the amount of turbulence and possibly noise. So on the subject of noise, I didn't have any issues. Some owners say theirs is noisy and others say theirs is quiet. That just goes to show that noise levels depend on what you're riding, how you're riding it, and how you're wearing the helmet, not just the shape of the helmet alone. Okay, let's talk about the ventilation. The chin vent is very effective, but only once you work out how to get the best from it. There are two sliding switches. One of them is here on the outside, and then there's another on the inside of the chin bar. If the internal one is closed, the external slider allows air to flow up through the chin bar into the eye port to freshen things up. I didn't notice that flow of air while I was riding, I've got to say. To get a detectable flow, you need to open the internal and the external switches, and then you'll get a really, really good flow. In good weather, I would just leave the internal vent open all the time and then control the flow by either opening or closing the outer switch. In bad weather, I'd leave the internal switch closed and then open the outside slider if I wanted some air to get through to the eye port. On top, the shutter slides back to reveal two inlet holes, and air can pass through channels in the EPS once it's come in and then towards an outlet at the back of the helmet. This might have some general cooling benefit, but I couldn't feel any flow of air coming in when I wore this helmet. Okay, let's move on to the visor. It's a KDF 32 visor. It's got two intermediate opening stages between fully open and fully closed. It gives a good amount of peripheral vision, which is one of the real benefits of an adventure style helmet like this. They do tend to be deeper from top to bottom, which gives a less restricted view of the road ahead. I found this one was also good in a lateral direction as well. The first opening position for the visor, which is sometimes called the cracked position or city position, that leaves a little bit too big a gap for my liking just here. On the plus side, I found it would stay open like this if I rode with the visor just slightly open. There's no visor lock to hold the visor closed, but I had no issues with it coming open of its own accord, and that also means there's no risk of feeling like you're locked in. A Pinlock anti-mist insert comes in the box. It's a Pinlock 70, the middle of 3 grades for fog protection, and it covers pretty much the whole viewing area. If you need to adjust the tension of the Pinlock, it's easy to do that using external screw adjusters. There's a sun visor, which operates on a switch at the base of the left side. The last bit of travel as you lift it has a little bit of extra resistance on the switch, so make sure you overcome that little bit of pressure to fully raise the visor. If you don't do that, a bit of the sun visor will stay in your eye line all the time, and the whole visor could shake into the lowered position when you don't want it to. That sun visor is anti-fog coated, and I found that to be effective in my time with this lid. Right, let's talk about what's on the inside. The comfort lining comes in 2 parts, the skull pad and then 2 cheek pads that are attached by the neck roll. The covering fabric is Scorpion's Quick Wick C material, which is anti-allergenic and antimicrobial. It's designed to help you stay cool in summer and warm in winter. I wore this helmet in spring and I found it quite pleasant. The liner's nothing fancy, but it feels good on my head. It also fits in with simple press studs, so it's easy to take it out for washing and easy to refit it again afterwards. There are thin sections at the top of the cheek pads that are meant to accommodate spectacle arms. It took a bit of a wiggle for me to get my specs in there, but once they were in place, they were comfortable. Behind the liner, there are recesses in the impact liner for intercom speakers, and they are very generous in diameter. There's loads of room, and even a pair of Cardo's 45mm speakers fitted in there easily, and they're the biggest that I know of as we record this. Those recesses are relatively shallow, so some speakers may protrude slightly from the recesses, but I wouldn't expect it to cause a problem. The fastening strap for this helmet, that's a micrometric quick release buckle. That's no surprise at all. There are somewhere between 40 and 50 models of flip front helmet on our site, and only one of those has a D-ring fastener. If you're interested, that's the Simpson Darksome. If you're not, then I'm sorry for delaying getting us onto Intercom compatibility. The ADX2 is designed for use with Scorpion's Exocom system. A control module clips to the side of the helmet, and there's a battery cavity at the neck. The first generation of Exocom has just been discontinued, and there's no information about the second generation unit as we record this. You might find some stock of the old unit, or the new one might be available by the time you're watching this. If not, then you'll be looking to fit a universal unit. As I said a bit back, there's room for the speakers inside, so I really don't see any trouble there. But I think you'll need to use the self-adhesive mount for the control panel, as the rim really around here is too thick to accommodate a clamp. I think a unit with a small contact patch will be better, as you could then attach it over the Exocom hatch. If you want a larger unit like the popular Cardo Packtalk Edge, then you'll need a larger, flatter area of helmet to stick it to. I think you probably need to put it near the Chinbar locking switch, somewhere like this, and I don't think that's ideal really. Okay, let's get into sizing, approvals and pricing. The ADX2 comes in sizes from extra small to double extra large. There are 2 shell sizes. The smaller of those shells covers sizes from extra small up to large, and the bigger one does XL and 2XL. I wore a medium and I was very comfortable in that. My head measures 59 centimeters around, and Scorpion suggests a large covers 58 to 59 centimeters. So in theory, I should have worn a large, not a medium. Personally, I wouldn't be in a rush to size up, even if Scorpion's size chart makes it look like you should do that. In terms of approvals, the ADX2 meets the ECE 2206 safety standard for the road. There's no ACU gold sticker for use on UK racetracks, but I'd be surprised if anyone wanted to do that with this lid. There's no rating from the UK government's Sharp Impact Testing Programme as we record this. If one of those is published, then we'll add the info to the description for this video. Okay, prices. As we record this in January 2025, the Scorpion ADX2 has a list price of £189.99 in plain colours like this. There are also various graphic designs available, and they're £219.99 at list price. That makes this a relatively budget option in what's actually quite a small field. There aren't many flip front helmets with peaks. The K-Berg Tormax X is probably the most common alternative, and the HJC C80 is another competitor, although that's being replaced this year by the i80. The other flip front with the peak is a premium option, the Schuberth E2. That's a different proposition altogether at £540. It's nearly 3 times the price of this ADX2. Okay, time to sum up. A read through the customer reviews shows there are ups and downs with this helmet. The little niggles that afflict a certain percentage of owners all seem to affect the helmet that I wore for review. The top vent rattled a bit in the wind, the peak wobbled as well, and I needed to grab hold of a peak screw that had come loose while I was riding. None of those are major issues. If I'd spent big ticket money though, then I would have been a bit upset by that. But for a helmet in the sub £200 bracket like this, those are much easier issues to tolerate. The weight, that's likely to put some people off, although I was surprised that it didn't really cause me any bother. As I said, there aren't many alternatives if you want a peak on your flip front helmet, and I think this one compares favourably with the helmets that do a similar job for similar money. I hope that tells you everything you wanted to know about the Scorpion ADX 2, but if there is anything you'd like to ask or to add, then please pop a comment below. Thanks for watching.